time now for the World Brief and a review of some headlines from today's newspapers. Let me tell you what's happening around the world. Now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has sent a delegation to Istanbul for peace talks with Russia. Now, that's after he had a meeting with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Zelensky did say that he had decided to dispatch a delegation led by the country's defense minister, even though Russia had sent a lower level team in order to signal to Trump that Ukraine remains firmly committed to seeking an end to this war. Now, for days, Zelensky had been pressing for Vladimir Putin to attend. But after US President Donald Trump confirmed that he wouldn't attend, Putin appeared to follow suit. Now, Trump went on to say this.
Nothing's going to happen until Putin and I get together, okay? And obviously he wasn't going to go. He was going to go, but he thought I was going to go. He wasn't going if I wasn't there. And I don't believe anything's going to happen, whether you like it or not, until he and I get together. But we're going to have to get it solved because too many people are dying.
It's quite a remarkable move there, isn't it? And it does show that Putin does seem to have a stronger bargaining position. Now, the United States doesn't appear to be offended by his absence. There may be a meeting, really, between Trump and Putin in the future. But for now, attention does shift to these Turkish peace talks, though expectations for any concrete peace is now low. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's final stop on his Middle East tour lands him in the United Arab Emirates. In a first-of-its-kind moment, the Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque in the capital Abu Dhabi was closed to the public to welcome the US president. The visit began with a solemn tribute at the mausoleum also of the UAE's founding father, the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan. Accompanied by Sheikh Khalid bin Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, Trump paused to reflect on Sheikh Zayed's legacy, which the UAE says is to continue to promote the global values of tolerance, coexistence, and peace. Nevertheless, Trump's visit to the mosque and the hospitality he has received during his trip across these Muslim countries is in direct contrast to his treatment of Muslims. Now, if we cast our minds back to 2017, Trump did sign the now infamous Executive Order 13769, which was commonly referred to as the Muslim ban, which banned foreign nationals from 7 predominantly Muslim countries from entering the United States for 90 days. Now, despite that history, Donald Trump was awarded the Order of Zayed, which is the UAE's highest civilian honor. He was given this special recognition for his role in strengthening bilateral ties. Now, culture aside, Trump on Thursday did pledge to strengthen U.S. ties to the United Arab Emirates and announced deals with the Gulf states totaling over $200 billion. And the two countries also agreed to deepen cooperation in artificial intelligence. The White House also said that the deals included a $14.5 billion commitment from Etihad Airways to invest in 28 Boeing aircraft. So it's been largely a successful trip for Donald Trump across the Middle East.
Right. I mean, a lot has to be said. Yeah, largely successful trip. He got in there and he was marveled by the marble. And he was like, oh, Jesus, white marble, this cost a lot. But what does it show? It shows that all of this Gulf nation that started discovering oil around the same time Nigeria discovered oil have been able to turn theirs around and do well. Some of the economies not as great as ours. But if I told you that Nigeria's GDP in 1960 was more than that of Saudi Arabia, would you believe? But today Saudi Arabia has outpaced Nigeria, and the GDP is over $1 trillion. Nigeria is about over 100 billion. At some point, our GDP was even better than that of Qatar, but today it's now 188 billion or thereabout, or 200 billion. So the question is not what you have, but what do you do with what you have? Trump will go out there for his own diplomacy. All of a sudden, he's now blind to the human rights concerns of these countries because money is coming in for him. And that's how it's always been. It's very transactional in nature. It's always about what is in it for him. You can see that he's not as frontal again about the peace in Ukraine because he has gotten his deal he wanted, minerals deal, so he signed that. So probably when he meets with Putin, maybe they'll be able to strike something, but it's going to be largely on Putin's term, which will be to cede Ukrainian land, which will be a pretext for future further conflicts. So you can see Trump in the Middle East. He has got some deals in, about 140 billion, about 14 billion for Etihad Airways to buy Boeing planes and all of that. And there's still the controversy about him taking his gifts, 400 million. So the question is, America has no moral rights to tell us anything again. Because if an American president has turned into a beggy collecting gifts from leaders of Arab nations, then they have no moral rights to talk. And thank you to Trump. Because just like how America lost the moral right to teach us about democracy after Trump called for an insurrection in the Capitol, America has also lost the moral right to tell us about probity and fairness with foreign nations, because he's the one now going to collect gifts. So we have seen it for what it is. We are understanding the politics and the way it's going. It's just that the sad reality of the world is that if you don't have power enough, you will suffer like Ukraine is suffering today. America has signed their deals. This is not the first time he's going to do it. He did it. He picked trade over calling out Saudi Arabia when Khashoggi incident happened. Right. And when Khashoggi was cut into bits and pieces, before you know it, rapprochement started again with Saudi Arabia. So it's not today. It's not the first one. But for me, how these nations built influence should be studied. And that's where we should learn. Because you see, these three nations they went to were families. Al Thanis in Qatar, Al Sauds in Saudi, Al Maktoum in the UAE. They were families. They discovered oil just like many other countries. But look at what they've done. Look at the influence they've been able to build. Yeah, you can talk about human rights issues and all of that, yes. But life is not about what you own, but what you do with what you own. I was in Saudi last year. You know, see what they're doing with Neom City, trying to attract people, tourism and the likes. So we need to be forward thinking. At some point, we need to introspect and say, where have we gone wrong? The instructive word again today is, at some point, Nigeria's GDP as an independence was larger than that of Saudi Arabia. Where did we go wrong? Leadership. Let's think.
Thank you very
much. Cool. We'll start
My
continuing
goodness, I almost said thank you both.
No, just a quick one, so that we can focus on the newspapers. But I think overall, a fruitful trip for the United States president to the Middle East. And I was reading some reviews from the foreign trade minister, from the UAE foreign trade minister, who was saying that, well, this is quite the first time they've seen a president who is this business-minded, whose negotiations are so centered around business transactions, which for them they felt was, okay, a bit strange, but quite refreshing. That's in his words. Why is it refreshing? Because he says normally you go through so much bureaucracy to be able to get these deals done. But Donald Trump comes to take his seat at the table. He negotiates. If he likes it, he takes it. You bargain with him until you get to the point that you want to get. Is this good for, leadership, for democracy and so forth? Possibly not so, because there's a reason why we have all of the different ministries and cabinets that we have, because some of these decisions need to be made by, not some, all of these decisions need to be made backed by statistical evidence, national policy on various things. And this is why he has so many issues that end up sticking around in the courts, because he kind of shoots from the hip at the negotiating table and then checks later whether it's within the confines of the law or whatever it is. However, what I find extremely valuable for me, the takeaway from this trip is, well, maybe it's time for us to relook at how we do these state visits. Because usually if we have a state visit, you have the president and he goes with his cabinet and some key people. Yes, some private sector may be represented, but it doesn't lead. Donald Trump led with private sector. Now, in his trip, in total, they're saying that the total volume of deals is up to $10 trillion. Of course, some are just pledges and so forth. Yes. $10 trillion. You look at UAE and his time in Abu Dhabi and the tours he took, especially the highlight being that $1.4 trillion AI investment, which will create an AI city. And so there will be an AI hub in the United States that will export chips to the UAE, which was previously unheard of, by the way. But for Donald Trump, this is a win because he says this is how we take the business away from China, in his own estimation. So I just like the structured coordination of leading with your private sector and making sure deals are being signed from business to business, or even if it's from their government to our businesses, because private sector is more likely to follow through. If you've made a pledge for even $1 to my business, I will chase you until, as opposed to when it's a government-to-government deals, and then there's MOUs, and then furore, jamboree, and we never really get to the bottom of these deals. So yes, we have had some deals of that nature locally that unfortunately were not followed through as well. And we always talk about the Siemens deal, right? But still, where can we ensure that when we do these state visits, especially when we're going on an investment on an investment tour, if I may call it that, how can we make sure that our private sector leads these conversations and brings those deals home in a way that will be tangible? I think for me that was the biggest takeaway from Donald Trump's business-focused diplomacy.
That's what we can definitely call that. We'll definitely call that trip. Let's move on to our newspaper headlines across Nigeria. Start, of course, with this day. And as we've discussed, this day does leave with President Tinubu on his way to Rome, which is honouring Pope Leo XIV's invitation for him to attend his confirmation mass this Sunday. Now, Bishops Kuka, Ugoji, Kaigama, and Martins are a part of the delegation. Now, according to data released by the presidency, 62% of President Tinubu's appointees are Christians, which is significant because it addresses concerns that the 2023 Muslim presidential ticket would lead to the underrepresentation of Christians. But let's not forget that the United States House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Africa had approved measures urging President Trump to sanction Nigeria due to the reported persecution faced by Christians. Now, the New Telegraph leads with the senior advocate of Nigeria and chairman of the Elders Forum of the PDP in Imo State, Chief Mike Ahamba, allaying fears of a possible one-party state following a wave of defections of notable politicians to the All Progressives Congress. He did describe the defectors as being in one of two groups. One group is the self-protectionists, he called it, and then the other is the food is ready group. That's what he said. Now, moving on to the Punch. The Punch does break down this inflation story we discussed, as you mentioned, Rufai, and it does focus in on inflation. Now, we do acknowledge that despite, of course, a slight easing nationally, if we're looking at some states, 10 states, and the FCT in particular, they actually recorded inflation rates exceeding 30%, highlighting the persistent price pressures in several parts of the country, which may not be reflective, obviously, when we're looking at the country as a whole. The Daily Sun leads with the House of Representatives approving a bill for mandatory voting. Essentially, cast your ballot or face breaking the law. Very, very interesting times ahead, which is highlighted by the Daily Trust front page. And it leads with Nigerians rejecting the proposal for compulsory voting. What do you guys think about voting or going to jail?
Okay, see, so you can encourage people to vote, but the idea of compulsory voting, I do not get it because many things happen during the voting process itself. So when you say compulsory, everybody must vote, it might not be the case. I mean, there are glitches. INEC accepted the fact that they had glitches in the last elections, and glitches can disenfranchise people. So there are many things, but what we'll have to do is to encourage people more. And the question is, how do you encourage people to vote? When we have fairness in the electoral process. Voter apathy has increased because a lot of Nigerians do not trust the electoral process. That's why they don't bother to go out to vote. But the moment you make them believe that there's fairness, they will come out and vote. Look at countries like Germany and the likes, recording over 60% voter turnout. The reason is they believe in the process, they believe their votes will count. And except we disabuse the minds of the electorate and say you do not have to know INEC before you can win an election, you don't have to have police, you don't have to have the state paraphernalia, then forget it. So please, let us try as much as possible to do better. I was talking about the inflation in over 10 states, and I'm happy the Punch had taken it up, which is a very sad one. So if over 10 states is over the national average, FCT and all of that, which are the major cities, it still shows that it's biting. So how do we solve the problem of inflation? We need a lot of production. We need a lot of production. Yes, they've opened up the borders and said we can import food, but how is that going? Because there was an article written like a couple of months back saying that that process actually was stalled because they had not checked out properly the processes that people will go through to be able to even get those import waivers. So when we say inflation is coming, I do not think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't have all the data, but I don't think it's a knock-on effect of those import waivers because I'm not sure those processes have kicked in as they should. It's still, some seasoned farming that have come in and some wrapped up on production. But secondly, the other way to fight it is there's a lot of middlemen that are storing food that are making a killing that you need to be able to fight as much as possible. These middlemen is harder to fight, and you know why? Because they're also in the political terrain. They're the political farmers. So you need to be able to encourage them. But thirdly, the most important thing too that we also need to look at is post-harvest losses. Over 50% of the food produced in this country are perishable. Go to Benue. Some days you see tomato in the market. Most of those tomatoes, they perish in the hinterlands. So we need to build more silos and storage facilities. People like Aflex are doing some good job by getting storage facilities in place. Then fourthly, also, you need to bring in loans for people in the agricultural sector. You know, single-digit loans for them to be able to invest in the agricultural ecosystem. Then you also need to bolster logistics, cold storage. You know, they plant strawberry in Jos. But it's easier to get imported strawberry in our shops in Lagos than to bring it from Jos. I've tried it. There are many fruit sellers in Jos that I've tried to, okay, get me those exotic fruits. When they give you the way bill to bring it from Jos down here.
Even grapes.
Fantastic grapes in Jos. So how can we bring supply chain logistics?
You said it now.
I'm serious. So how do we get supply chain logistics down here? So those are the most important. That's why sometimes if you're in Abuja, you can enjoy fresh milk and other things like that. But Lagos, you can't enjoy it. And these things ramp up inflation. And also, look at Jos now. There's fighting. Look at Bokos, which is the potato belt. So we need to be able to fix insecurity, get the farmers back to back. And we can do it. I believe so much in this country.
We can do it. And in addition to that, Rufai, mechanization
Yes.
is extremely important. And mechanization not restricted to tractors, but to the whole value chain. Yes.
To the grain per hectare.
Exactly.
We're not producing a lot of grain per hectare.
Exactly.
The output per hectare.
What is the output? What is irrigation looking like? We're still relying heavily on the rainy season, the wet season, the dry season, our greenhouses. Even the use of drones is now very common in agriculture around the world. So all that type of technology is part of our mechanization is very important. But earlier when we took the story on President Tinubu going to Pope Leo's the 14th inauguration, I didn't make a comment on it. I just wanted to talk about what they're calling faith optics. I was reading an article about Anthony Albanese, Australia's head of state, who's heading to this, and they're saying that in his own strategy, he's trying to do this again to reassure Catholics. In Australia, 1 in 4 citizens is a Catholic. So he's just trying to ensure that the, shall we call it, the repertoire around Catholicism, inclusivity, tolerance, and so forth, that message is sent. So it looks like there are several heads of states who are echoing that. Now, what are we looking forward to? J.D. Vance, Donald Trump said he won't attend because, of course, he just left for the funeral. So J.D. Vance is coming in. Zelensky will be making a comeback. Some royal families will also be present there. But we're looking at the political side of it, or the diplomatic side of the value of the Vatican. Because yes, there's a spiritual side, but there's the political side of it and the power side, because this is a head of state as well that we're looking at when we're dealing with the Pope. Now the question is, with this particular Pope and his ties to Nigeria and his affinity for Nigeria, they say between 2003 and 2013, he visited Nigeria more than 9 times. So he may not be a Nigerian Pope, but he is a Pope who has ties with Nigeria. I think that often we do talk about the president's travels and so forth. This particular one I think is a good one because it's strategic. This particular Pope is probably going to be more political than many popes we've seen in the past. We saw Pope Francis attended the G7 and he even spoke at the G7 summit last year. So he's going to carry on from there, and we're going to see more advocacy, more political diplomatic involvement from the papacy, in my opinion. So getting in there, getting those good relations while we see so many global geopolitical shifts at the moment, I think is valuable. But again, I hope that we can focus more on business, investment-oriented state visits. But this is a good one. However, moving forward, I hope that we can focus more on the state visits that can generate revenue. The ones I was talking about before, where our business people, our captains of industry can be in the front row seat meeting with, whether it be the Gulf states or whoever it is.